It is officially on, so we're live. Hi, Anders. Good to see you again, my friend.
Yeah.
For anybody who's not familiar, this is Anders Palmquist from Hawke Media, formerly of the agency ARMR, or ARMR, as we like to say, which we get into that change a little bit and why you are now Hawke Media, which is a really cool story, I think. Anders is from Minnesota, which is a little bit of a personal connection for me, being from the Midwest, and I can 100% guarantee that Anders lives up to the Minnesota Nice moniker. He is one of the kindest humans I've ever met. That goes without saying. But I think his agency certainly embodies that as well. So like everybody, meet Anders. Anders, thank you for taking the time today, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I was going to say, really like your hat. I know that's a new, fresh purchase. Probably a little bit US Open influenced. We're right around that time of year right now. I'm sure it was pretty crazy.
Yep.
Don't know if you watched, but
I avoided the carnage. Yeah, largely avoided the carnage.
Yeah, good. So Anders, Hawke Media, I want to get into a little bit. You guys used to be called ARMR. Tell me a little bit just about how ARMR came about. When did you guys start your agency? Why did you start it? Who started? Who did you start it with?
Yeah, absolutely. And appreciate the kind words in the background. Appreciate that. But probably 2014, kind of turning into 2015. I think Amazon was still kind of nascent in terms of the marketplace relative to where it is now, and vendors were predominant. Just in terms of volume and kind of the way that people want to operate on the platform. And so Oscar, true founder, had built a model to do international distribution, basically a drop shipping, but at scale, and to look at US businesses that wanted to approach international markets using Amazon as that platform. And we did that, and distribution scaled very, very quickly, but it's a very cash heavy business.
And remind me if I'm wrong, Cathay Phoenix, was it Cathay Phoenix?
Cathay Phoenix. Yeah, exactly. Which is like a blend of like a fraternity name and I think either like a middle name, but basically it's kind of this blend, but very close to Cathay Pacific, which is not the same. That's an airline, I think. So slightly different. But maybe we got some search intent there that maybe it was not valid traffic. But yeah, so CF or Cathay Phoenix was that kind of original business premise, and it went well. But I think what that did is it opened up kind of our ears to the plight or the kind of struggles that these US-based manufacturers and brands just had in the US, and just uncertainty of like, okay, what's next in terms of our approach on Amazon, or what are we missing, or we're not making money, like this isn't worthwhile. And I think if that's happening, now 10, 11 years ago, there were kind of some fundamental pieces that were wrong because ads hadn't really kind of grown to the state that they were at, compared to current day. So I would say at the turn of 2015 and going into the 2016 calendar year, basically it's kind of when I pivoted from like retail buying and kind of managing that team into building out what was going to be kind of a manufacturer's rep type of agency. And then we kind of scratched that kind of traditional mindset and said, okay, what would it look like if we were basically like a chief Amazon officer or a fractional director of Amazon, and just brought in the tools, the personnel that have like the requisite experience, like manage the channel and build out the tactical teams, et cetera, to then kind of plug right in or bolt on, and then manage that channel. So we flashed that out from, okay, we're going to look at Amazon as former Amazonians as a great talent pool. And I think we kind of built a lot of our tribal knowledge kind of leveraging that hiring aspect. But certainly like data was one of the biggest things that we approached first. And tapping into you guys has been one of the best decisions we've made over the last 10 years. And so that's really kind of enabled us to look a few layers deeper than just kind of business reports or retail analytics on the vendor side. But yeah, so we kind of pivoted from, okay, we're going to do distribution, then into maybe traditional manufacturers representation. And then we said, no, let's go right into how would we manage the platform as if we were an employee for that business, or if I was the owner of that business. So that's kind of just the mindset that we approached when we talked about, okay, what would a managed service look like? So
you guys started there. So this is really cool. So, I mean, really, you were drop shipping, you were using the Amazon platform as a distribution channel early on.
Yeah.
Saw the need for, to help other brands do this and manufacturers do this same thing. Not uncommon story, right? Especially back then, when, like you said, it's pretty nascent, and Amazon, bit of a black box. Now, you guys had some very particular expertise though, right? Because I think a couple of your founding members were former Amazonians. Is that correct?
Yeah, myself included. And that's where I met Oscar, my partner.
Oscar Barber, for anybody.
Yes.
Eats,
Shout out to Oscar. Yeah. And so we were on the Amazon Canada team in its very early stages. So like it was established and media was there, but then they were building out these categories. So Oscar launched health and personal care in Canada. So basically, I think the kind of simplest way to describe it is we had to make sausage constantly, right? So we knew how it was made, what are the steps or kind of what are the processes that need to be in place to run this category effectively. And I think, while systems are dramatically different now, where everything is either automated or it's pushed to an outsourced team, whatever it may be, I think just understanding what the intentionality of Amazon was and kind of what the direction that they wanted to go in was really helpful, just to say, okay, right now, yes, it's a very manual process. So we need to understand the dynamic between these two systems, or, what does your P&L look like? And, is this item going to get crapped out? So can't realize a profit.
Right.
So I think just understanding kind of, again, the problem that needed to be solved. That's how we, I think, made a very effective management solution that was, a little bit more resistant to change. So it could continue on because these needs were still the same as they aligned with that platform approach that Amazon wanted to take.
You started there. I'm curious to hear now, so the model was, hey, kind of embedded, Amazon director of sorts within the team.
Yeah.
Is that still your model today under the Hawke Media umbrella? What is the model look like for you guys? How do you actually engage with a client now? What does a contract look like? Or, how do you, what kind of services do you guys work with?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think to kind of put or optimize across some T's. So we joined Hawke, really at the start of June last year. So we just came up on our 1 year birthday, and I think joining a very well established, well recognized digital marketing agency, there's a lot of resources there. But if we look at this as a big jigsaw puzzle, we were kind of like that missing piece, that you've been searching for a long time. So
for
it's
Hawke,
been, for Hawke, yes, yeah. It's been really rewarding to kind of plug in, but I think because we were that missing element, we've been able to bring a lot of autonomy in terms of the approach that we want to take to continue managing clients on Amazon. So what we've done is now brought that experience and that preference on how we want to approach the platform, and kind of made that the staple from the marketplace side, where we've certainly developed over 10 years. It is really kind of stemming from that core service, which would be fractional director of Amazon that's going to do admin, ops, fulfillment, advertising, really kind of end-to-end management, and then parsing out important pieces from that full service scope. So very clear, ad management or retail media now, as it's evolved into major, service unit for us. But so too would be project work. So if you want to go from 0 to 1, we can identify a retail ready project that's going to say you need, to hit these elements to really build a strong foundation. And then we'll say, here's your account and it's ready to roll, and you can then manage it as you've identified, based on your preference on kind of the services that we're providing. We've distilled a lot of individual pieces, but I think it all does go back to the kind of core nexus of how do we want to look at 1 to 5 months down the line, and also 1 to 5 years down the line for the account, and how are we improving the P&L so that it's profitable as things scale? What does a optimal retail offering look like for that particular brand? How are we going to resolve these stock in, stock outs, because that's a killer for progress. What resources do we need? Nowadays it's content and creative optimization is equally as important as ad optimization. That's kind of the forefront now. So so like that emphasis is still carried through. We've also had the opportunity to like mature and get into spaces that we normally wouldn't have played in. So we were pretty tight about our boundaries of, we're going to manage the marketplace. This is our expertise. This is what we want to do. Sure, we can do other things, but we're going to say no, because this is really what we want our core competency and our mastery to be in, so that we're not giving this false pretense of being an expert in, some other subject. So now that we're plugged into Hawke, we actually do have, these consummate professionals in those areas. And that's increased, the number of doors being opened in terms of, how do we want to look at affiliate and influencer? How do we want to, incorporate a broader SMM plan and pull in the paid media team, paid search team, the paid social team, and really kind of craft a robust strategy that's on and off of Amazon. So those are the things that have developed quite quickly since the acquisition.
Yeah, so I'm gonna separate a couple of these pieces, because I think there's some really cool stuff in here. I'll circle back to the Hawke integration, because I think this is a really kind of common path for a lot of agencies that I think some other agency owners would like to hear about too. How you guys went through that acquisition and what led to that? What was the original intention? How did you get there? Those kinds of things. But first, and maybe for like anybody who's out here assessing Hawke Media for Amazon services or otherwise, you just described kind of the model, right? Which is, hey, we started as kind of this like embedded almost Amazon person for you on the team. We have the model where we can still do the whole end to end, meaning what we would call kind of a full service model, right? If you need help sending in inventory, we'll help you do that. If we need to do forecasting, if we need to, and just correct me if I'm off on any of these things, right? So, but you have here also packages. So if you need to pick and choose what those are, you can do that. Okay. So that's awesome. Obviously some advantages with Hawke having those other channels and other
resources. Right. Yeah.
And so if speaking on like the clientele that you guys typically work with, who's like an ideal client that you guys really love to work with or see the best results from?
Yeah. And I'll just kind of preface it with like, it does need to be largely a brand, right? We've worked really well with distributors or, large catalogs or even just like white labeled products. But I think the brands that we like and love to work with the most, have their own unique elements in the products or, media that they're selling. So grocery in particular is like a really fun category for me to work in, because you taste it twice, right? Once with your eyes and once when you actually get to consume it. But every grocery product is ultimately going to be just a little bit different, even if it's pasta sauce or crackers. Like everyone's got their own really unique formula. So the ICP for us would be, I mean, now it would be SMBs, but I think we've always really focused on small and mid-size, which we would evaluate up to like 100 or 120 million in GMV, not just on Amazon, but just broadly speaking. They might have like less than 80 or 100 employees. And that mid-size might be much smaller than other industries or much larger, but that's kind of how we would classify it. But I think underserved industries and communities is also where we've really, really been able to permeate and help a lot of brands get onto Amazon and then build an immense amount of awareness and sales. So what used to be called like ethnic beauty, and that was a really bad moniker for the category. Now it's evolved tremendously. I believe like black hair care, right? And like that was a space that we helped many of the major brands get onto the platform and begin to cultivate that platform performance. So looking at like where there's an opportunity and like you can have that direct connection to the audience in a very, very strong or meaningful way. So like if you want to simplify it, what is the niche? And sometimes the more specific, the better. So we'd say like there's riches in the niches kind of thing. So we'd look for sometimes obscure, but really kind of strong brand positioning, kind of clear elements of like what would differentiate. And then either being, I don't want to say under-resourced, but maybe resource constrained. And that could be finance, that could also be personnel, it could also be time. And so it typically it's like one of those or two of those three elements. And that's where we're coming in and saying, okay, you go focus on growing your Kroger channel, or you go focus on trying to get into Target, or you go do this. Like, we can manage the Amazon platform and we'll engage with you consistently, and you have a lot of visibility on what's going on, but your time is best spent working on the business, not doing, working in the business, right? So yeah, we kind of offload that and become that kind of true partner. And for us, it's been successful. I think our average 10-year client was 37 months. So like kind of far exceeding, I think, what typical agency client churn would look like. And a lot of that has to do with how deeply we connect and collaborate with our clients, and the reliance on pretty much MS and OP, so marketing, sales, and operational planning. That's kind of the core term that we would use. So we've kind of, in a good way, made ourselves very sticky or kind of irremovable, because we're driving that business forward consistently and empowering the client to do other really key focuses for the brand at large.
Yeah, and I mean, you speak on kind of the constraints, right? Or resource constraint can mean a lot of different things. Right. Obviously, anybody who's looking to hire an agency knows that there's a certain cost associated with those agencies. How do you guys like to structure your agreements with clients? Do you do a percent of sales? Do you have a fixed fee? Like, how do you typically do that?
Yeah. So, and I'll kind of work my way from the largest clients downward. For the largest clients, we'd actually just set like a flat retainer, and that's going to be priced where it's still far more economically viable to bring on the agency, all the tools, all the personnel, than going out and even just finding the person. So we can beat that market rate and quickly engage where we don't have the same spool up times as a new employee might, or someone with no experience. So that would be like a flat retainer. Usually our retail media is going to be a percent on spend. It's a very traditional way of calculating, what agencies would be, but that core service, that full service model, or what we call like tier one full service, that would have a flat fee each month, and that's just to kind of cover the majority of our costs, not even drive sales, but offset costs, and then percent on incremental gross. So that's kind of how we balance these, where we can offset the kind of the downside on, okay, we have this expenditure here, we've got our employee costs, et cetera, our overhead, but we want to grow at the same time that the business is growing. And we want to evaluate, what is that delta getting larger and larger, or is it actually getting smaller? We want that to be larger and larger. And that's where the incremental percent on incremental gross really is powerful, because then it also hits the reset button every year. So like, there's still a lot of work to maintain the progress that you've made, but we still want to drive that upward mobility, because that's how we're getting compensated, right? And hitting our own targets. But we try to package it as, what you see is what you get. So we won't have this incremental cost here. We won't have this additional line item there. We really want to package it as, this is what your agency is going to bring to the table. That's people, knowledge, resources. And if anything is beyond that scope, it's just going to be a recommendation from me or the team to say, Sam is incredibly smart. You guys need to go look at MixShift. Here's the intro, right? And I'll make that more of a personable kind of introduction, as opposed to, forcing someone into, choosing something that's not really kind of part of that core service. But like I said, you guys have been instrumental, and one of those really key elements for us to say, okay, here's your reporting dashboard, here's your customer dynamics, here's your P&L, and we can use that reporting capability to then have a very consistent experience with those clients, and our team is extremely proficient in that. So yeah, it's a very much a symbiotic relationship. So
cool. Yeah, and just to kind of like be very clear for anybody out there who's just stumbled across Hawke for the first time, do you guys focus on any specific categories? I know you guys focus on both seller and vendor. You mentioned you guys' background in Amazon with healthcare and beauty. Any categories in particular that you guys are really good at, or that you love to work with? And like I said, just to confirm, you guys do work with sellers and vendors both, right? So you're agnostic to the platform. Talk to me a little bit about any like specialty things.
And one final thought on just like the kind of ideal client that we serve. Very often we're brought in to assist with or start the transition from, let's say, 1P to 3P.
Yeah.
Usually 3P to 1P is not as
very in vogue right now, for sure.
Yeah, but that's something that we've done and have done since like 2017, of just like saying, here are the rules that we need to follow, and here's how we avoid, running issues up the flagpole to Amazon, and then having, a much more kind of dramatic type of shift here, instead of, okay, month one is this, month two is this, month three is this, and kind of move systematically through that process. So that's a very common type of engagement for us. And then that goes into managing the seller side, which we do feel is more honest on the business to run that day in, day out. But you also get the benefit of increased profitability for most products, more control, better visibility, et cetera. So with more, I guess, responsibility, comes more work too. But
so highlight there, anybody who's thinking of transitioning from vendor to seller, Hawke Media would be a great partner for that purpose, right? You guys have seen that happen many, many times, have built a lot of muscle around that transition. And it is a tricky one I've experienced it myself with a couple of my clients and brands that I work with, and it definitely has some nuance that you want to manage carefully. So I think that's a good just call out, for your guys' team as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Cool. But industry-wise, to answer your question, because then I kind of hopped around a bit. Fashion, food, beauty, toys. I would say sports is certainly a big one, and then pets. Like those are kind of the main industries now. But we've worked in every single GL, I think, with the exception of video games and movies, like software. But I think where we kind of typically gel the most is brands that do have a consumable nature. It doesn't have to be like high volume consumable goods or like FMCG. It can be like a 1-2 year cycle. But I think something that we can pair into that kind of next purchase or that next deployment into the brand portfolio, that's really kind of where we've seen the most success in terms of our planning and our execution, have that recurring revenue start to build over time as we continue the engagement. So but anyone that's seeking to sell on Amazon that is trying to understand, like, hey, is Hawke a good fit? We take all walks. I think the only thing that we'd say is, if you try to sell a CBD product, Amazon is currently not the place to try to do it. So just full disclosure there. So
yeah, definitely no, and I just wanted to attest to your guys' expertise. I think in a couple of different ways. I think the health and beauty, just having seen and grown that category for Amazon Canada, there's still a lot of understanding there, about brand gating and beauty and, some of these other things that are nuanced within the category. So I think you guys have a lot of expertise there too. That's worth calling out. So just to pivot a little bit, but before, I'm going to pivot a little bit to the trajectory of ARMR to now getting folded into Hawke. So when you guys started, how big were you? Where did you start? Like physically, were you a remote team right away? Did you guys have a team located? And what was the intention of the agency? Did you guys intend to get acquired? Not to bury the lead. Obviously, you guys ended up getting acquired here about a year ago. You're on your 1 year anniversary now, which is pretty interesting to talk about. What was that intention back in 2015, and knowing where you're at today? Like, how did it go?
Yeah, it's a good question. But I think when we started the distribution side, I won't speak for Oscar, but I think that business, I think we saw a pretty long runway, and just in terms of engaging with larger and larger and larger brands. And I think we, very much on that pathway. But I think that, again, going back to like it being a cash heavy business, I think we also looked at Amazon's downward pressure on pricing, specifically like to what their profitability was. And certain elements of that model didn't fit when we talk about international freight. Because like for us, it was really like, hey, we'll get that purchase, and once you purchase from you, like, you're good. Like, we'll cover everything else. We just saw that kind of profitability start to dwindle, and it was market by market. Yeah. So that was like not the tea leaves for us specifically, but I think that, in conjunction with like the obviously increased call outs from people we were working with to help them with the US, we really kind of looked at what would be like our core competency from those Amazon days. So like vendor management or strategic vendor services, you did have to look at multiple kind of elements in the marketplace. So finance to ops to content to advertising or marketing as it was back then. And then also like vendor negotiations, et cetera. So we looked at, okay, how would these kind of pillars support that agency business? And bringing on more people from Amazon allowed us to, I think, have a very consistent client experience where like, whether it's Sarah or Roman, like they come from that same pedigree. I don't want to say that in a elitist way, but just the same mindset of like data first, data first, data first.
You can pretty typically tell when you run across a former Amazonian in the way they speak about the platform and just their level of kind of attention to detail, which is value, right? Like, so I can definitely attest to that too. And I guess from the very beginning, when did you guys start thinking about getting acquired? Like, when did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, I would say probably 2018 is like really when we talked about like what would be the ideal scenario, like what would be that experience going into the acquisition, post acquisition, from the ownership side, and there's like obviously like the financial element, but there's also like the contribution and ownership element. So like, do I need to be conscious 24/7 on this business, or do I get this relief and then I can work on the business and then figure out what's next? Because Oscar is very much that entrepreneurial spirit. And so like versus myself, kind of operator, we kind of had very different pathways post acquisition. And then this is 6-7 years ago. We had clarity in kind of what each other wanted. And that's kind of what has always helped our work marriage or our kind of yin and yang scenario.
Good place to start for sure. Yeah. Alignment in the interest. Like if for anybody who's out there building an agency, like we talk about this a lot, is finding those co-founders. I think you commented on my post.
I did. Yeah.
Just like, how do you find a co-founder right out there in the world? And, obviously being in the trenches helps a ton to be able to understand that. But I think even if you know that person well and have worked with them for a long time, you still have to have a very intentional conversation or a couple conversations about like, what are we trying to do here? Right.
Yeah.
Because it shapes the entire trajectory of what you're trying to do in the agency, I would guess.
Yeah. And I think like place in life is a big part. I think and in that kind of response thread on LinkedIn, I think John Durkett said a really good comment of like surface area of luck, where it's like being out in the world and like engaging and doing that, like you're just going to naturally have these moments of serendipity or whatever else. And like, that's how I even hired one of our longtime directors was, hey, I was out to eat, and I bumped into Corey and like, hey, how you doing? Like, oh, we catch up and 3 hours later it's like, okay, here's Oscar's contact and I think he'd be a great fit for this role. So like those elements don't happen unless you're going out and it doesn't have to be purely networking, but just like out in the physical world. But yeah, like from the acquisition side though, and kind of the planning elements, I think even before you asked like team size and kind of like how did we physically, like start the business, like where were we at? Were we in a garage? Were we in a back bedroom? We've always been remote first. And a big element of that was not the overhead that would come into play with like an office space, but it was, can you find, across the entire United States, like the ideal candidate that just happens to be in a different geographic location. And that's kind of how we've found extremely talented people and also retained extremely talented people as they've maybe moved literally coast to coast or have a change in life event that we're like, hey, I have kids, or I've got, parents I need to take care of, or be close in approximation before COVID happens. For us, it was just like, oh, we're used to working from home. So
it's a serious advantage in hiring and recruiting, I would say. I think. To attract talent so that you can stay in place and contribute.
Totally. And that was, the kind of the client facing side and really kind of like what day in, day out from a planning and from an execution side, like that would be the US team. We also looked at US and Canada and South America. And we have a large international workforce, whether it's like Upwork or direct engagements, but the Philippines and Pakistan. So like if you want to pursue that VA type of model, we did that in the early days with distribution, and then figured out exactly kind of what type of personality and background we wanted. So like math teachers were awesome for us. Accounting was great because it's like rigidity in a process and doing it over and over and over. And so we picked up just some rock
former
star
CPA here, so I can double vote that one. Sure.
And just attention to detail and kind of error-free elements were awesome. And that's just a great way for us to connect. But as we progressed, making sure those felt like team members. Yes, they're still contractors, but like, hey, you're part of a community. That was really kind of where we did make leaps and bounds to make sure it was inclusive and not exclusive. But all of those pieces helped us remain lean, because the challenge with an agency, I think, is always scaling the head count of like, when are you ready to hire that next role? So whether it's a developer or whether it's an account manager. I think in the past, like we've had moments of, hey, we're going to hire ahead, and that going well and also not going well. So there's an element of learning on the fly, but certainly over time, we found like we need to be at that slight point of discomfort and bridging a point of discomfort in terms of bandwidth and kind of the workload that we each have. And it's at that juncture that we can make this change to hire that next person, and to also use the smart people in the room that you spend time to find and hire and keep, and have them as a community, like raise up that new hire and then build the talent, internally. So we went from, okay, yes, former Amazon, and this is the skill set that we want to harness. We retain that. And then over time, it was, okay, how do we then educate and promote that same type of work ethic and mindset on Amazon by coaching them up? So like, I'm going to pair you with Roman, and you're going to become a wizard at data analysis or at Excel or at SQL. You're going to work with Sarah, and she's going to teach you the ropes from like a customer relationship management side and kind of how you do retail planning. And so you've got kind of this, I'm going to say buddy system, but it would take a whole village to kind of manage and train those individuals. But then we've seen those individuals do really, really well. And then sometimes it's launch pad to the next thing, which is awesome. Happy for those folks and happy to have been kind of a springboard there.
Yeah.
Or there's keeping them in the fold and 1 year turns into 2, turns into 3, turns into 5. And, it's lovely to work with people that you like. So
I mean, you have certainly maintained a high expectation for your team members and hire really well. I think that's a core tenet of what you guys have done from what I've observed. And when you were kind of talking about, back in 2018, when you were starting to make that transition towards like, maybe we'll consider getting acquired. What changed for you? Like, as you, once that decision was kind of put into motion, what were the things that had to happen in order for that to be possible? And by the way, I'll be respectful of your time, Anders. You good at the top of the hour for a couple minutes? Okay. We'll go something over.
Cool. Well, I don't want to say it was like a framework, like a traction, would put out. We certainly went through that and attempted to kind of deploy that at the agency. We picked the elements that we liked, right? And I think longer planning cycles were things that helped us kind of pivot from, hey, we're thinking about this, to what would we need to do to become more attractive as a candidate. In addition to just kind of circumstance, and I think when we got acquired, but right seat, right person was a big one. So like for me, like, hey, I like to be very hands-on, but like being in front of clients every single day mitigates my ability to be engaged with each and every account manager and kind of assist with the more strategic issues. So like, pulling yourself out of the work and then putting it in front of the right person, that was a big choice. But also, I want to say like build versus buy, but we really looked at like, are we a tech-enabled service? Are we a service? Are we a tech company? We said like, this is really what we're not. This is really what we're not. And we had a very strong kind of living document that was a 1, 2, 5 year plan. And we would go like, this is who we are. This is who we serve. This is what we want to do. And we would go through, and on a quarterly basis for all hands, we would go through this. And like, this is where we're at relative to what our goal was. So if we're behind, how do we make that gap up? Or was it bad planning? Or did this business idea not really come to fruition? Or, hey, we're way overpacing here and we need to increase resources. So we had this widely visible internal doc and presentation ultimately that this is the direction that we wanted to go. And as long as we were kind of hitting on these elements as we proceeded, then at least we knew we were kind of on the right bearing. But you're going to do, kind of this.
Was that living doc used in conversations as you guys were talking to potential acquirers?
That, I'm trying to think if that was. That probably would have been Oscar and I kind of looking at like what our central tenets were, and like using that to build a good fit for the partner that we were seeking. From like a planning side, I think that would have still been kind of more, I don't want to say like tactical, but I think probably more granular just compared to like some of the discussions you go through during due diligence and then intent and then offers, etc. I think the spirit of that would have been in, but I'm trying to think if like letter of the law.
But maybe not that specifically. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it guided. It still does. I still reference it.
You mentioned a couple of the things that you decided you weren't, which I think is actually a really great way to look at that. A good mental model for folks out there to really get clear on like who are you as a company, so that when you're in these conversations, there's clarity about what you're really good at, where the multiple probably is for that potential acquirer. What were some of those things that you decided you were not?
Yeah, very early on, we were like, we are not a content design powerhouse. Like that is not what we focus on. Like I love being creative and personally I'll do that, but huge difference between interest and hobby and profession. But we would figure out, okay, if this is kind of the area that we're deficient or that we're saying this is the line, it made it a lot easier to find a partner that you could very consistently recommend and then have that same experience and find someone that you could either have an aggressive price on or make it kind of a joint benefit to client, agency, and now partner provider, where everybody's getting that mutual benefit. So I think, kind of drawing a line in the sand of like, we don't do this. So like we would start with, I'm not your accountant, I'm not your lawyer, and like, I'm not a graphic designer. So as long as we understand those three things, I'm comfortable doing the bulk of, work on the account as long as it doesn't fall into those buckets. Or I'll point you in the right direction and make an introduction to the people that know exactly what needs to be done. So that kind of just helped scope creep. I think we also, you could look at it like the scope of work, but you could also look at just like the type of organization that we aspired to be. So like the first time we did, or the first draft of that 1-2-5-year plan is like, hey, we're going to go from, I think probably at the time it was like 12 to 15 domestic employees, 15 to 20 international employees. And it was like, here's the 1-2-5-year for headcount. And it was, not quite a hockey stick, but it was accelerating. Year two, we kind of revised that down, and it was a dynamic shift of US versus international. They're like, hey, can we change how many people are, or how many counts are applied to a person, and increase that upwards to get billing higher? We'll support that with outsource. And even the third iteration, it was actually a reverse course of, hey, we want better quality management, and pricing is actually going to increase here, which is warranted. And so we're changing from, hey, we want to be a mid-sized agency to like, we're not a boutique, but do we want to be in a small kind of business zone? And are we comfortable with that? So I think there's learning who you are as a business was something that we grew into. Like we didn't know it every single day, or that changed. But once we found like that fit, it was very clear of like, okay, now this is the way we need to proceed with tools, with personnel, with decision making on overhead or for profitability or capital raising, whatever it may be. It just solves a lot of the noise for us.
And being able to say no to things because you're clear on where as an agency, I think is just such a powerful thing, because it allows you really to get good and well resourced on the things that are working for the agency, right? So I appreciate that, Anders. And just getting towards the end here, I just want to touch on, in particular, as you guys were growing, as you think about some of those growth spurts you went through, what were some of the things that really helped you kind of uncap growth for ARMR, whether that was actually in like revenue for the agency, or maybe growth for your clients, or maybe just in like how you felt the business was running, right? Because you could be, generating the same amount, but feel a lot better about how that was being done. And maybe, from a lifestyle standpoint, like how you guys were managing it. What were some of those things, or maybe something that stands out in your mind as you're along that long journey of like 11 years, of what really kind of helped you guys feel like you had the reins in hand?
Yeah. And I mean, like advertising was an easy one because I think there was like, the onset of ads, and then you had this very manual management process. And then, now like there's major SaaS tools that to help ad optimization. So like getting early with, I think one of the major ad optimizers was like a really great decision, because I think what we got to do is provide very early feedback on what we needed, and then saw those changes come to fruition. But then that product then developed, but it was kind of under the direction that we had hoped for in the first place, which is awesome. But that's kind of just one offshoot. I think that if I had to circle three things, one, like our strong decision on building an outsourced or kind of an offshore workforce was one of the best choices very, very early on, because I think you get over this like trust hump of like, can they do it? Do they understand, etc. Like you said, like, hey, I need you to do this, right? And they're incredibly talented, smart, driven people, and there's wage arbitrage, right? Like, yes, all of those things are true. But I think getting over like the apprehension side by putting them in individual roles of like, okay, this is the catalog team, and then having, a captain on that team. This is our ops team. This is our client success team. And so then you kind of created these verticals where each and any one of them could do a very, very good job in any role, but they knew exactly kind of this is what the process was, very consistent. And we built the ticketing system. We've actually built it over and over and over as we like migrated tools, but we found like that was an awesome way of delegating, tracking, and keeping a really good or close eye onto the progress there.
Just paper trail, auditability, tracking, clarity, transparency, all these things. So I'm hearing like specialization, pretty key. In outsourced work in particular, right? Instead of avoiding the generalization. And then two, having kind of somebody on first that owns that function. That sounds like a pretty important element of that as well. Like somebody who's really supposed to be kind of the steel thread through that team.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to like right seat, right role, right seat. And our account managers are still doing that business athlete where like they would have to do ads and fulfillment. And then we made a decision like, let's cleave that. Let's get the ad manager in. And even though our account managers are very well versed in it, that separation of responsibilities created a lot of relief just in terms of like now depth into planning or depth into I think core competencies again for those team members. But
freed you up to get a little bit more strategic, work on the high, high value, kind of high touch things, right? Which are hard to do. You're in the business all the time.
Yeah. And it allowed us to get away from like being excellent at going from 0 to 1 and being good at going from like 1 to 2. But then now with this kind of Batman and Robin duo, that ad manager can also increase their depth in terms of like, here's that full funnel strategy, or, being able to talk about, hey, your investment is this. If we increase it or if we decrease it, like this is going to be the material change we're expecting. And so like the client's got more confidence in terms of the secondary or tertiary stage of that relationship.
Which requires some good quality control up front, I have no doubt. And not to pivot too much, and I'm a little biased, but I do want to touch on this point, is like, I know you guys, you have like kind of a rock star internally who has been kind of the data person for quite some time, right? Lifeblood of an agency, you got to be able to dive into accounts, got to, be able to work, got to be able to like assess performance, those things. How did you guys think about data and like kind of how you were going to use it? And how did you get it to kind of be wrangled for ARMR, now Hawke?
And I mean, there is such a thing, obviously, like analysis paralysis, but like more data is better just generally. But like you can have like too much if you're not going to do anything with it, right? That was always a struggle. But we always had this growing wish list of like, hey, I wish I could see this, or
Yes.
hey, I've got this process. Like I built a repeat purchase report in 2017, like using customer data, really clunky. Like I
Yep.
wasn't a macro designer, but like it would take 15 minutes to run. And it's
Yep.
like, I don't got time for this. To like, hey, we have this broken toy. Like, how could we do that better? And it's either, Roman, could you build one? Or, hey, damn, like how's this gonna work? And great, now I got customer dynamics, which was awesome, right? Just like I think that at the time we were like, you just eliminated a year of planning for us, right? And
Speaking on the,
execution.
and this is really the buy versus build conversation. And I think, from
Yeah.
the mix shift perspective, we have this conversation a lot with agencies
Yeah.
where they probably have that data person internally, but they're just not, that there's still this big gap towards actually developing, right? So tapping into the APIs, managing the warehouse, doing that thing. And I don't want to get too sidetracked because I know we're kind of,
but I think,
you guys had a great person there who was he was like the captain of those things, and then could take that data and make use of it. I think that was a really critical thing that I always interpreted, I guess, understood about your organization.
Yeah. And we benefit from his personality of like, I'm not going to manage to a metric, right? Like this does have a point. But I think it allowed the person who was communicating to the client look good, but also just tackle the questions of like, hey, I really would like to know this. That's beyond the capabilities of what's nascent in Seller Central or in Vendor Central. Like, yeah, I would love to understand this. And so we like had the direction, we had the data, Dan, the person to make sense of it all.
Well said to say, hey, we needed to answer questions that we couldn't answer in Seller Central correctly, right? And so you needed to do some manipulation, and you had the person to do that. I think that's really important. Yeah. So last question, Honors, then I'll let you get back to your day. Appreciate it very much, man. Like anything in particular right now that is really interesting in Amazon or has your attention, or maybe even different question, like any advice you'd want to give to like a fledgling agency as they're setting off, maybe they're just getting into the game, and are looking at Amazon going like, what do I need to know? How should I approach this thing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, everything comes with reps. Like, so like doing the thing is going to be like the fastest way of being good at it. And that's just my take, but that's also been my experience. Just like golf, right? You got to play more if you want to be better. I would say if I was in the shoes of a fledgling, agency operator or owner, one, I think Amelia will be interesting to see how Amazon kind of deploys that AI agent, but I think more broadly speaking, AI agents will be a really key element of any agency. So whether it's picking up on customer service requests or doing repeated actions, but being proactive there. So if you're not able to do that right now, or if you're seeking to do that, even starting with like, again, generative AI and using LLMs to help you at scale, great. That's got to be a fundamental piece. But I think training capabilities at all levels. So if you have outsource in addition to that, now you've kind of like doubled in terms of like workflow and efficiency. And I would say the other piece is like not losing the personability or communication capacity for the people that are working with clients. Because like the biggest thing that any client is going to want to have is, are you on top of it? Like, do I feel confident and do I trust that Anders is monitoring what's going on? Is he telling me what I'm seeing and I need this? Or am I saying, hey, why are we out of stock? Or hey, I saw this, right? And so if you can have someone that's walking the store and understanding the business, but also just being aware of any change and being proactive, that's huge. And being
much,
authentic too.
If I were going to say it, back, it's like, look, you need to lean into AI right now, because it's going to be a big part of your workflow, and it's going to help you be efficient from the get. It's also just going to help you get on top of advantages and new trends that are coming. Not all of them are going to hit, but you need to be there and you need to understand how it works. But on top of that, which is, hey, now as we move to a lot of this automation, and this is something philosophically we really think about a lot, as you move to automation, how do you maintain the human element responsible for performance, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be able to not only explain how we got here to this point of performance, but also be that trusted resource, because the dynamic between the client and the agency will continue to change as, you know, you're trying to prove like, hey, I'm worth what you're. It becomes maybe a little bit more about the strategy and the structuring and the, you know, understanding the nuances and what can be leveraged to actually put it to use. And also, I think that's definitely part of the agency role as well, which is how do you get out of like the, oh, I'm pulling levers and now I'm a little bit more at this strategy level, but can make use of all of the different data sets that are available to us now. I think that's expertise, right? And like the specific knowledge of the thing, because I think that's where you have your advantage as an agency. Yeah, no doubt. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anders, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for the time today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I hope the best for the team now that you're rolled into Hawke. You guys can do a lot of different things under the umbrella Hawke Media. I think there's really cool stuff. If you guys ever, if you're stumbling across this video and you see Anders, know that they have a pretty wide net that they can cast for your brand.
Absolutely.
And you also get some pretty personable and great people on the other side of the phone, which is pretty great. So
I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day, and I'm sure we'll chat soon. Thank you.
Okay.
Later, boss.
Yeah.